everyone to the Aspen City Council work session of April. We have to redo this. Welcome everyone to the Aspen City Council work session of April 13th. We are going to have a discussion with our Historic Planning Commission as well as our Planning and Zoning Commission. Just kind of a touch base and talk about a few topics that have come up through our ComDev director. Realizing that in the past, we've tried to meet with our different boards once a year, kind of a little more informally, just to touch base and things like that. We will try to do that again more in the future, but at this point, we've just been catching up on a lot of things, and we wanted to, again, kind of go over topics with you this time to see where we can all make improvements. And I was just going to kind of start this discussion as Ben or you lead off for us, Dan, is this is about asking ourselves, is this accomplishing our goals? Is this policy accomplishing our goals? And does it need clarifying or does it need simplifying? To do those two things. So that's kind of how the view and the lens I'm going to try to take a look at this discussion with. So we'll have you all introducing yourselves and take it from here. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. I'm Dan Folk, Planning Director for the City of Aspen. And so, yeah, we're pleased to have Teresa McGovern, the chair of our Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as some other members. So I think we'll start with introductions, starting here, and then we've got folks who can come up and introduce themselves.
Yeah, we do have extra seats up here for Planning and Zoning members. We will squeeze you in, and it's not like you have to be out in the audience. So come on up. There's one over by Kate. There's one here by John. There's two over by Ben. Thought they were going to put name tags out for you.
We do have nameplates if you want them. I'm Teresa McGovern, the chair.
Yes.
Just recently reelected for Planning and Zoning Commission, and I'll leave it.
Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mary Ann Pitt, also on Planning and Zoning, nearing my 4-year term. So we'll be probably reaching out to you in terms of being reappointed to the commission. Thank you all for your time. Appreciate it heavily.
Very good.
And I'm Ken Canfield. I'm the vice chair, actually, of P&Z.
Now, did your dad used to live here in town, too?
He did.
I knew Ken well. I did
He
a little.
was a longtime president of the Picton County Seniors Council, which is,
I did a
I
little
think,
door-to-door work with him before.
I'm sure that he did that.
Yes, he did. He's a good guy. Thank you. And we have, who is this over here?
Charlie Tarver. I just came so I could sit next to John.
Okay, Charlie Tarver. Thank you very much. We appreciate you all being here with us today. So we'll let you carry on, Dan.
All right, so yeah, we've identified 4 topics that, working with the commission, that we wanted to talk about tonight. And so I'm just going to give a brief introduction of each topic, and then we've got a couple questions, and hopefully it'll spur some discussion. Okay. And these are topics that we're hoping to work on. They're really focused on the land use code. So the first topic we've identified is the hierarchy of review. And if you'll bear with me, I'm just going to give, again, I promise it'll be a brief introduction. But on the slide, there's a few examples of the types of applications that are subject to administrative review, review and approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and items that go to the City Council for approval. So I'd like to provide a little bit of detail on a couple of these application types. So by example, an insubstantial amendment, which can be approved by the Community Development Director, there's some criteria for that, and I just want to, again, give some examples so to set up the conversation. And so on an insubstantial amendment, which again is administrative, some of the criteria, the request cannot change the character of the development. It needs to be consistent with the conditions and representations in the original approval. It does not require a variance or an increase in height or floor area. And then it allows for technical corrections or dimensional changes that are all within the allowances approved at project review. So again, typically administrative reviews are things that really don't change the character. They're pretty much within the scope of what was originally approved. Another example are special reviews, and these are things that go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And there's a list of specific topics that are considered special reviews. They include dimensional requirements, replacing non-conforming structures, reduction in open space in a CC zone, off-street parking, accessory dwelling unit design standards, wireless telecommunications, and affordable housing unit standards. So again, these are things that go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They're the final authority on those. And then a final example are the ESAs, the environmentally sensitive areas, that also go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And those include the 8040 Green Line Review, stream margin reviews, mountain view plains, and Hallam Lake Bluff. And then these are all within the scope of work of Baseline Engineering. That's a code consultant that we're currently working with. You had a report from them, I believe, in December of last year. And so this is one of the things that they're going to be looking at and providing some recommendations on what I call the hierarchy of review, and if we can find some efficiencies.
Okay.
And so a couple of questions just to try to get the conversation going. Based on kind of the brief background I gave, what types of requests do you feel City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission should be delegated down the review hierarchy? And what types of requests require a public meeting, which again would be things that go to the commission and to the City Council?
Thank you. I guess I'm kind of wondering, are there things on P and Z's plate that you would think could be kicked to administrative approval and review?
You know, I think that this topic came up many times over the years that I've been on the commission, and a lot of it came from when we did the moratorium and rewrote the code. The commission's agenda got very light because a lot of that stuff got kicked to council or administrative, and so we were like, how can we help make this more efficient for applicants and more efficient for council to take some of the agenda off of you guys, like tents and fences and zoning stuff, instead of kicking it to administrative, which I know is very busy. And I think a lot of times when we have a combined review that maybe has some administrative, like residential design standards, and some special review, they will bundle that and have us do the whole review, which makes sense, instead of parceling it and saying, this is approved and this isn't. And so I think in our opinion, or in my opinion, it should be kind of the other way. What can we do to help council?
Thank you for that. I just thought I'd ask before you guys
I
are the
appreciate
citizen
that.
volunteers.
One of the examples that does come up a lot that's down in the City Council column is the temporary and seasonal uses. I think pretty much every year you see a request for a tent at the Molly, I think is the one. And so, because I think administratively, the director can only approve it for like 2 weeks. And so if somebody wants something like that for a longer period of time, I don't know if there's other examples.
Yeah,
Put Ben on the spot.
That seems to be one of the most recent examples we've had in mind. And I think we approved it for this 1 year, but we did have concerns about it not matching the roof line very well and kind of changing the real appearance of that building with the added FAR. And so, at least for myself, I could see moving something like that, but you might want to have it similar to the HPC call-up, so that if it really was, some sort of huge tent that's going to be there for 4 months and neighbors want a little more chance to talk about it, I think it's not something we would end up calling up very often, but it might be a wise step to have, just so both you don't feel that it's the final bad decision maker, or that, it gets reviewed by another set of eyes. What do other people think about that one? Bill?
Thanks. I want to start a little bit higher level than your direct question, Dan, but I will come back to it. And what I mean by that is I have to ask myself what the purpose of the P&Z board is. I'm not sure that the P&Z board is empowered and directed appropriately today. I have heard on several occasions, the P&Z members talk about how their job is to simply interpret the code, and they have no ability or directive to be reasonable and thoughtful and overrule the code when it's applicable and practical. And I think that if they are operating in circumstances where it's just interpreting code, then staff should be making those decisions. There's no reason for a citizens board to be making those decisions. I think the whole purpose of the existence is for the situations where the code it doesn't apply, doesn't make sense, doesn't work for those specific circumstances. And so I'd like to see sort of the mission of P&Z altered to suit that. And as such, the types of things that we should, we as council, in my opinion, should push down, certainly include things like tents and fences and things that, in theory, they should have more expertise at interpreting and making practical, good decisions for our community on than we do. I hope that we as council appoint P&Z members that have experience and knowledge and passion for that type of decision-making and thoughtfulness. I'm okay to the call-up concept with the call-up concept that Rachel alluded to, but not for every circumstance. Calling up a fence just seems to be unnecessarily burdensome to me, for example. You know, not giving someone that approval final from P&Z is just an unnecessary amount of bureaucracy and delay. You know, they got to get on our calendar, staff has to prepare additional memos, et cetera, et cetera. It just doesn't seem necessary to me. So I'd ask everyone to consider that is are we utilizing the role and concept of P&Z appropriately? And could we give them more discretion and direction?
Thank you for that kind of higher level viewpoint on this. I think it's good. That actually kind of raises the question for me, if we're drilling down a little bit into specifics of, have there been fence issues where we have a height limit and air flow through issues and visibility issues that have risen to the council level? And is it, why were they so, or what was the issue? I mean, I certainly can agree with you when you see it's a little 2.5-foot pink fence, but if someone is really trying to go out of bounds, what have the issues been, Ben?
Yeah,
St. Regis?
yeah. It's a good example, John. Cemetery Lane. And then we could go down a list of.
Well, go ahead and give me a little more than the names, because I'm not familiar with this.
No, I think this conversation is interesting. I think I will say, going even higher level, I will say that Aspen, I think more than most communities, has put a lot of land use authority at city council level, and has, to some degree, for a lot of significant reviews, has turned P&Z into a recommending body. It's the way that our code's been structured. That's kind of been the direction that I think defines one of the things that defines Aspen's land use code and differentiates it from other communities. But I do think that we often find ourselves coming to city council with topics that we know you have full agendas and are probably things that you might want someone else to be making some discretionary calls on other than you. And so I think from a staff's perspective, I think P&Z is probably also supportive of this. I do think that there are some things within our code that would be much more appropriate to be at the planning and zoning level rather than at council. I will say, to your point, Bill, I think whether it's happening at the administrative level, at the P&Z level, at the council level, most of what's being engaged in the land use world are called quasi-judicial findings. And those review criteria are pretty essential. And making sure that the review criteria that are set up for a particular review are the things that the decision's being made on. And sometimes those review criteria are really easy to land on. But I will say that in this differentiation, in this hierarchy between administrative, planning and zoning and council, all of those, to some degree, have to be defended at that decision level with making those findings. And straying too far with discretion sort of opens up those decisions to challenges if there are ever challenges to those decisions. So From my perspective, it's more so, if you look at the review criteria for the things that are administrative, they're pretty binary choices on behalf of staff. When we start to get interpretation, it then sort of finds itself at Planning and Zoning Commission level where there is a gray area, and we're asking the commission to sort of land in a place. We usually make recommendations from staff, but we're asking them to make things that have a little bit more discretion to them. And then I think more typically the things that go to council are things that are more impactful, or where there's even a broader range of discretion. And so like plan development project review, where you're setting, the site planning and the uses and the dimensions for, giving flexibility to what are typically bigger projects. Like those are the kinds of things that usually find their way to city council and most other communities. So, I think you get the point, but I do think that there are opportunities for moving some of these things
Yeah.
up and down.
And I'm in agreement with that, but I'm just asking the question of what were the fence issues
Oh.
that have risen to council's level to?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought the question was a little bit more broad than that, excuse me.
No, you kind of started answering Bill's question too.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
Well, but the things that are related to height, and when we're asking for some discretion on whether or not exceeding a stated height dimension is appropriate or not on fences. Again, I can approve a tent for up to 2 weeks or other temporary uses
Right.
for up to 2 weeks. After that, it seemed pretty clear that when those provisions were created, that the community wanted city council to be making decisions about temporary uses that went beyond that. So,
Okay.
but typically height, floor area are the kinds of things that come to council.
It just seems to me that there should be some pretty strong guidelines in general on fences, as opposed to this guy can have a 12-foot brick and this guy can't have chicken wire and this guy. Well, I know, but that's why I'm kind of wondering why there should be any discretion if we have a rule. I'm sure people have different tastes that they might want to enclose their house all the way or whatever, but if there's not a avenue for variation, then nobody has to hear the request.
We have come to city council with height of fences around community gardens, around golf course driving ranges, around tennis courts, those kinds of things.
Okay.
When people do want higher than 6 feet along their back property line as it faces the street, those kinds of requests have come to city council. Those are the protecting from bears at St. Regis.
Well, and I'm going to chime in. That's the difference. That one was approved. The one on Cemetery Lane was not, and that was human interpretation of what hardship was on each of the applicants. And that was the interesting part as far as does it meet the letter of the law. One side found that there was hardship for the St. Regis and their bear issue. Another side that said no to the Cemetery Lane in the 3-2 vote.
Okay.
Council. And jumping into my comments, actually from Bill's, because I don't have much about P&Z. I was obviously on P&Z before, and the only thing I really can say is that I think P&Z does a wonderful job, but the one thing that I remember and one thing that I would want for you guys is to be able to recommend policy changes when you vote a certain way, but only because of the letter of the law, and you find it very difficult to work within those parameters, and you think it's either antiquated or just plain wrong. I just think that's when you can hopefully recommend to council that this might need to be looked at again, it might need to be changed. We voted no on it or yes on it, but we should have gone the other way, but we only did it because that's what the criteria said. And that's really the biggest thing I'd say about P&Z. Otherwise, I do think it's set up well to be a wonderful recommendation body along with all the rest, and it's one that I look to very intently when we look at reviews that P&Z looked at previously.
Yeah, we do look at the minutes and things. 1 second, Bill. I appreciate what you're saying, and I would second that. I always feel that should there be policy changes that you'd like us to consider, we'd bring them forward. Teresa?
So one of the other 3 bullet points in our little memo here are more about sort of sections of the land use code that we'd like you to look at, or open policy resolutions so that staff can have time to look at them. And I know I think we put together a list of 10 or 12 items, and for brevity and good use of your time, we pared it down to our top 4 items that we see the most often. Parking mitigation, nonconformities, and calcs and measures like that bring the most applications to our table. So we're asking for direction from council to direct staff to look at these.
Okay.
And
So these are.
let's look
see.
at this code and make some changes so that we feel like the code is supporting us and we can vote with our conscience and with the code in the quasi-judicial manner that we are directed.
Well, let me ask, we'll just stick to the one fence topic to make it easier. Would it make sense, would your board appreciate having that decision-making ability on fences if we set up some very clear guidelines to why there should be any sort of exceptions to a standard rule?
I think our board is capable of making those decisions. I think the way the code is currently written, it's pretty black and white.
Right.
And part of our role, as I understand it, is we don't have the authority in those hearings to go black and white, to go gray. We are the black
Right,
and
right.
white. So yeah, if it's written in the code, we are capable of interpreting it and giving hardship.
And is that is that something you feel you could give them the background, the framework for that? Okay. Bill?
Those comments sort of perfectly framed what I wanted to say to illustrate my point a little bit better to what I said before is I want P&Z to be the color that differentiates the black and white. I want them to sort of establish what makes sense for our community members, what makes Aspen livable, habitable, affordable to the extent that they can influence it, practical. Too much black and white is making this community difficult to live in for families, for aging people, for young people moving back to our town who grew up here. We need some more color, some more thoughtfulness, some more ability to deviate from the, what was the term that you used, Ben?
The review criteria?
Right, review criteria. Yes, review criteria are important. It's important to understand what the rules say, but it's also important to be able to make a decision that is reasonable and practical and right for our community members. And so I'm saying the same thing as I said before. I just wanted to illustrate it better.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. I'm not disagreeing with you at all. The challenge I want to avoid in this is that you create more flexibility, create an ability to use the gray zone more often, and then 2 people get approved and 2 people get turned down, and they see their circumstances as being very, very similar, and not creating liability in the gray zone for you denied us this, it hurts our economic value of our property, you gave it to someone else. And how to, thread that needle is the only challenge I see with some discretion. And it's a broad term, so it sounds great, hey, let's have a little more discretion, but is it, we'll give you an inch, you take a yard, we'll give you a yard, you'll take a mile? What are the limits to that discretion?
The only policy that I'm aware of in recent history, and anyone feel free to jump in if they recall something different, that has caused that kind of liability for the city is the demo allotment program. Everything else, we're so afraid of our own shadow to be reasonable to our community and help make decisions and exceptions that are reasonable for our community. But it's theoretical liability that hasn't played out. The only thing that has caused real legal liability was this bad demo program.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think some of that plays into more of the broader questions and things that we've been dealing with, which I think we're going to get to more or less. But essentially, I think, in my opinion, some of these regulations and rules that we're working off of the framework itself is a little bit dated. The Aspen Area Community Plan, for example, was on a 10-year sort of update, and then I know that that's gone, in different directions, shorter and longer through time and space. And then, there's, I think, a lot of rules that contradict one another as well. And so we'll be looking at a project and especially if it's in a specific zone, then it gets a little bit more intricate, and we've tried to do some work sessions within, the city's reach to just try to interpret and understand at a deeper level, how are we supposed to interpret what is in the code, et cetera. But at times it does get a little bit murky because there are maybe so many layers and levels that do completely just kind of knock one another off the mark.
Yeah, and I am hearing that, and I want more specificity of which ones we can take out of the mix. And maybe it's different on each project and things like that. I am all for moving to simplicity, clarification, and rules that accomplish the goals. And trying to get rid of the extra that may be just unnecessary steps or anything like that. So I think part of it for this to really advance the rest of the way, and just again, using just the tents as the example or the fences, is that we need to look at the review criteria to see if it is complete enough to then be the clarifying rules, the guidelines that you need. And so I would see some work sessions developing those criteria to be able to, give you the tools to make those decisions as these things get handed down.
Okay.
That makes a lot of sense to me. As a commission, I think that we've been frustrated at times because we're ready, willing, and able to work, and there hasn't been anything for us to do. Meetings get canceled. And we know that the council's focused on, I guess, 3 big issues at the moment, and that ought to be your focus. We come up with issues like the whether a cash in lieu can be done to mitigate, and whether there are permits available that somebody could buy. And that's like a total no-brainer, but those issues go to y'all and they come to us, and that's just needless bureaucracy in my mind. So what our intent was to try to identify as many of those kinds of issues as we could, and then basically make your jobs easier by taking the grunt work for us, because we're not the elected officials, and to try to make those decisions. As far as Bill's point goes, I practiced law for over 40 years, and the Aspen Land Use Code is one of the more complicated statutes that I've ever dealt with in my career. And there's a lot of discretion in that code. I mean, what's compatible with the neighborhood? There are just all kinds of discretionary calls like that.
Yeah.
But I'm a little leery of moving from a quasi-judicial role to a role where we're just deciding what's reasonable and not. I'm very uncomfortable with that. It's very easy for us to apply rules. We disagree with staff a fair amount of the time, and we've turned down or recommended turning down applications that where they disagreed with us, and the other way. But it's because our discretion is constrained within the context of the code. I think that clearly you're talking about a different kind of commission. And since we're not elected officials, you all are elected officials, when it comes to those kinds of decisions, and obviously there's a spectrum, and at some point you're really talking about decisions that bear on the entire community in a way that are more political than rule-bound. And it seems to me that's not our role, that's your role. We'd like to help in any way we can. And so I think the idea of if you all are open to it, when we come up with an issue that we've debated, and we see this is likely to be a continuing issue, and maybe it deserves some more attention by council. I think that's a really good idea, and I'll try to remember that in the future.
That sounds real good. So, we're going to depend on you to get us back on
Yep.
schedule.
Are we ready to, this is a good topic, but we are working on it, like I said, with baseline engineering. So we will be coming, I'm assuming, to a work session with some recommendations at some point. But do you want to get into some of the specific policy questions?
Yeah.
So the next topic is transportation and parking management. Probably the favorite topic of every community I've ever lived in.
The never-ending story.
Do you want to introduce this one, Teresa?
Well,
I do. Go ahead.
just sort of, the reason it's on here is this is the only topic that people come out to public comment for. So I think it warrants a bigger discussion. I think it warrants some more attention from our community because it is the one that we have had lines out the door to talk about parking impacts of projects, parking impacts of like during construction, and we as a commission have identified some holes in the parking, the demand management, or however that TIAs. And I think it's one that I know staff and everyone has worked very, very hard on. I'm not sure the current parking management and transportation management fits the needs of our community. And I think we need to look at that. I think one of the other parts that's really missing is there is no cash in lieu or offset for when a project takes away on-street parking for a driveway, for access, for something. It's just sort of course you can move that. We don't care that it takes away two other street parking spaces. So I think that this one deserves some attention, and I know recent projects have come before us and then kicked to you guys that have had a lot of discussions about parking and transportation and whether we are actually meeting the demands.
I was going to say that the difficult question to ask is, do you believe that the code should go more back to specific, you need to build X many parking spaces on site?
I think there needs to be a balance of that, but in my personal opinion, we currently are underparked on most of our projects because we are trying to make a community not drive that drives. We adventure, we go out of town, we do stuff, we all have vehicles. And that's okay, that's part of who we are. Right. But expecting that a certain portion of the community is not allowed to have a vehicle is a pretty hard sell because of whatever approvals. But then across the street, they can have two vehicles. That's tough to me. I don't think that is a consistent application of our parking or meet the needs of our community, because that puts the burden on street parking, which we are underparked as well.
Underparked as well. Well, this, we're just going to kick the P&Z over to the entrance to Aspen. Whole congestion management problem that we have on Highway 82.
We're on it.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you for taking that on for us.
Yeah, this is just another
Please.
little introduction. So obviously, the zoning code does identify required parking for different uses based on the intensity of the use. And our code offers these various ways to meet your parking requirements. The traditional way is to provide on-site parking. You can provide some off-site. You can do shared parking. The cash in lieu has become pretty standard across the country. I think where Aspen is leading is these mobility measures as a way to account for your parking. So addressing the demand side of it, trying to reduce the folks that are coming to the site in a vehicle is a way that we offer to mitigate parking or to meet your parking, and then also the multimodal level of service. So investing in bicycle, pedestrian, and transit infrastructure is another option. And then I'll just mention the construction parking in neighborhoods. I'm not an expert, but we do require this construction management plan. It's really managed through our engineering team. There is a section on parking, and essentially contractors, again, can select from a menu of management practices depending on the scope of the project, including things like a van pool, project shuttle, carpooling, providing transit fare. There's a cash out option if people actually ride on transit. And so again, we're trying to reduce the number of vehicles coming into neighborhoods based on construction, but this is a topic that comes up a lot. And so that was something that the commission is very interested in.
You know, it has struck me that the hardest part of this, when it's construction management, and sticking on that topic, is who does enforcement. You know, because the plan lands with ComDev of how they're going to manage it. It happens out on the field in somebody's backyard. And, you know, I don't know that there's a loop with the parking people to know, but I've had to wonder whether it really should become more formalized as a program, so that you are going to build this, we're going to have different teams of contractors at different time periods for different aspects of the job. These are the teams and these are the permits that are associated with this job. And there only be X many permits per location. People can park at the Brush Creek Intercept lot and carpool in and things like that. Certainly some need their trucks and they need the tools. We all know that. But when you go by some of the sites, you know there's a lot of cars that are parked nearby that were not carrying tools and they were carrying just a couple of extra workers. But I think there needs to be more teeth in the construction parking management plan, and some way to have networked these specific projects with information to our parking officers. Now, I think Bill's mentioned this before, and I know it as a fact as well, is that our parking department is hoping to hire more people to be more actively enforcing the parking measures in all the neighborhoods. We're kind of hopeful that the wage survey will maybe give them a little boost for that department and be able to really pull in more qualified people. But that doesn't mean we can't start to fix the policies now.
I will say there's a fairly robust parking permit system that's associated with our CMP, or construction mitigation plan. Whether or not the limits within that from one project to the next are stringent enough or restrictive enough or provide enough incentives for people to find alternatives, I think that's a different, but there is a fairly robust, built into our Salesforce platform, parking permits for particular construction projects.
So do they get to the point of listing which vehicles, which license plates will be on the site, or?
They have assigned permits. I don't know, I'm guessing there's some, license plate identification that goes along with it, but they are associated with.
And then do you feel there is the enforcement backup to support the plan?
I think so. Whether it could be more robust or not, I think that's a discussion, but it's certainly part of the program.
Now, Bill, you have more experience in this topic than any. Why don't you add your thoughts?
Sure. I'll start with construction. I think we'd be chasing our tail forever in regulation on this, and it's unreasonable. I think focus on the outcomes that you're trying to prevent. If people are parking like jerks and blocking driveways and blocking alleyways, they should get huge tickets. That we should be monitoring. Can you realistically expect someone to list the license plate of every vehicle that's going to be on a given construction project? I think that's totally unrealistic. Some plumbing company might have 50 different trucks. Who knows which truck's going to be on that job on a given day? I think focus on the problems here, not on trying to solve something that we'll never effectively be able to police. So that would be my advice there, is let's increase the monitoring, let's increase the penalties for doing things that are unneighborly and generate a lot of complaints, probably. In terms of the current mitigation strategies, I'm open to this. I'm open to looking at, should certain areas of Aspen prohibit on-site parking entirely? If we allow for parking waivers through credits and things like that, should we be limiting that property's ability to get off-site parking, on-street parking permits? So some better coordination between the parking department and ComDev in that regard. It seems to me if you're going to ask for a reduced on-site parking, then you should also have reduced on-street parking privileges. I'm open to that. I think Teresa's comments regarding like, should this person be able to have on-street parking or on-site parking and this person not have to, might be alluding to deed-restricted housing projects. And if not having parking on site allowed for more density of deed-restricted units on the same lot, I'd be open to no parking on site. I don't know if that's already in our code or not. I'm not an expert on that part of our land use code, but I'm open at looking at this for sure.
Thank you. Other comments and thoughts on this from our board, or Pete, or?
Well, I just wanted to chime in that even though Christine wasn't able to make it tonight, she did try to send some comments on some of these questions. I think overall, she did comment on construction vehicles and advocated for more requirements for off-site, some carpool parking requirements, and asked questions about, can the city designate a space for kind of the off-site aspects of construction parking, and also kind of opined whether or not we could do, a limited number of construction projects within certain zones.
Within
and
a given
basically pace
neighborhood.
those so that they're not so impactful in any one specific region. And then in terms of kind of the upper question on TDM and fee and lieu and things of that nature, she did think that fee and lieu, quite honestly, did not seem to be a big deterrent, and so it's really worth reexamining what we have there today, and basically said more or less that bigger policy shifts would be necessary to really make an impact.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Pete. Let me ask a question which really wasn't in the memo, and it's like, I want to make sure I have it right, but where do the revenues from payment fee and lieu go? Do they go to operating of current transit programs, or they go to capital?
From my understanding, they are used by our transportation, parking, and engineering departments for physical improvements, for programmatic improvements.
Okay. So that could be sidewalk improvements and anything that's mobility improvements?
Anything mobility related.
Okay.
If they're not designated, sometimes depending on an approval, there's an identified project
That it goes to?
that it goes to. And if it's a more general fee and lieu, from parking, it can go to a variety of things, both capital and programmatic.
This wouldn't be a rush job or anything, but it'd be great to have kind of a documentation of where it's gone in the past. What's it done? How much has it been? You know, get a sense of that. I understand the dilemma. I mean, we're all facing it in everywhere, all the time. Now, we all drive, and but we all don't want to be a car-based society at the same time, interestingly enough. So, you know, I am someone who believes that it's important to see cars parked when people have cars, because they end up in someone else's neighborhood on street parking and just trying to move it every 3 days or 2 days and things like that. And so I don't like to overpark projects. The odd thing for me from my days doing advertising distribution was to go down into some of the parking garages under the larger hotels. And, you know, it's problematic, because you go through the back door to the Jerome, and all their parking spaces they were required to build are made into liquor storage closets and tents and all sorts of other non-parking. Then they park their cars over in parking garage so the public can't use it. You go to the bottom of the St. Regis, and there are layers and layers of parking spaces that are totally unused because they were made to overpark their place. It'd be great. I think it was the Grand Aspen Hotel that started leasing their parking for skiing during the daytime. And yeah, I'd encourage anyone to be able to utilize their spaces like that. But I'm not sure we're overparking some of the smaller projects.
I think a lot of the larger projects are overparked or underparked and underutilized, and some of the smaller projects that are places where people live full-time are underparked, which then pushes those vehicles into the neighborhood and has a bigger impact. I live in a neighborhood that has 72-hour parking. I don't know anyone who parks their cars there. It's all people who live somewhere else, park and walk away, and 2 days later come back and move it. And I'm like, I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
So I think that there needs to be a better balance of that. One of the other thing that's come up for P&Z on cash in lieu is whether we have the ability to designate those fees to the neighborhood in which the impact is being made. Instead of it just goes into this general pot, can we say, hey, this is on Park and Park. Let's make sure these funds get used for mobility measures on Park and Park, or wherever it is, instead of these people paid and it's going to
Yeah.
Burlingame, or wherever it's going. I'm just making it up.
right.
But I think that would be helpful for our commission to be able to say, this money, while the project may seem under park, all of that money is going to be utilized in your neighborhood to make it safer for pedestrians, to make it easier, to make better bus access, more bikes, whatever that is.
I think that's a very good observation and something we should try to make a footnote to this, or, when possible and as possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other thoughts that you've
Charlie, have a
had
comment?
on your parking?
I think Charlie may have had a comment.
Did you have?
Comment,
Nope,
Charlie?
Not yet? No. Ken, you have thoughts on the whole parking?
Well, what comes to mind for me was a specific project where there was a long existing condo building that was relatively old and fallen apart and small, and it was going to be replaced by a substantially larger condo building, and the parking was totally inadequate, in my personal view. And we had a tremendous number of neighbors coming out and just one after another telling us, it's hard enough for us to park anyway, and you're going to force all these people because every time they have a guest,
Right.
or if you've got a couple and they each have a car, it's going to end up on the neighborhood street, and it's just untenable. So while they met the strict guidelines of the code, I think this was an example of a underparked project.
I'm kind of wondering whether there should be a ratio at which the payment in lieu cannot exceed. That while it may be available for a limited amount of limited improvements for other mobility options, it's not open-ended with what people can ask for. Charlie,
That
you're,
is the case. I think it is. Like, depending on the zone you're in, you have to provide a certain amount of on-site, and then a certain amount can be fee.
I guess what I'm saying is maybe that ratio needs to be readjusted or taken a look at. Charlie?
Yes. I do not feel you allow us.
Yeah, let's turn the
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and-
This happens every meeting.
there you go, there you go.
Funny comments that I
There you go.
say. I do not feel that planning and zoning does any planning, and that is a travesty. We're not allowed to plan. Little things like what you just said, maybe we should look at parking, maybe we should look at construction mitigation, if we think we see something that we want to dig into, we're not allowed to, because we have to go we have to have a meeting, then we have to go to city council to get a request, then you have to go to staff. We can't go to staff and say, how many people restaurant outdoor seating? You can't go to them to staff and say, how many outdoor seating places, seats have we approved in the last year that were not approved in the original building? When you come in to do a restaurant, you do 100 square feet, we need 1.2 employees. How many have we included just by putting them on the sidewalk? Can't get that number. I've tried for a year and a quarter. It's an unmitigated growth, and I can't get the number, so we can't plan on it. And now, because I have an idea, no, you can't just have an idea and ask staff, because they don't work for me. What's the numbers? We can't do that. Look it up through the need to know information. Couldn't get it. I've spent a year and a half trying to get it. And you know what? You have someone who knows about, there's non-mitigated employee generation and parking mitigation, because the employees have to park somewhere. We don't know how many new employees you improved for every square foot of restaurant. You don't know that. We need to be able to do some planning, which means we need some information. We may find out after just a little bit of information that it's fine. You can't even find out where does the money go for the mall for when they pay for that seat.
Yeah, Charlie, I think that this program of the outdoor seating and the leasing is run through the clerk's office, and I don't know if there's ever been a request to ask them of how many seats that they
I've asked.
provide.
I've asked.
No, of a formal written request, but you're making it to us now. We can ask the clerk's office and the mall leasing program how many seats they think they've added.
It's not just the mall. It's, for instance,
Well, I know, but also the sidewalks, how many, but they do need to get permits for that. They don't get to just put the seats out there and block the right of way.
I understand
But what I'm saying is we can get the answer to that question. But let me ask, is it something that you cannot or are prohibited from putting on your agenda? We're going to have a brainstorming session on X or Y. I mean, we're not prohibiting your board from, it's a matter of making the time on your agendas if you had topics you really wanted to discuss and brainstorm and spit a few things out for us later.
you've known me for 40 years. This is something for a year and a half I've tried to get, and I don't feel, for whatever reason, it's gone nowhere. And the same thing is with the parking of trucks at houses that are being built. It's a little bit of information. Let us find, we need some information so we can see, is it something we want to spend our time trying to make a new plan for?
Right.
This hall
So
monitor.
there's more information needed.
Hall monitoring right now. We decide if a door can be 6 feet or 7 feet. The big thing that needs to be done is figure out, why do we have 72 cars parked on this block, and what can we do about it? There are some things that need to be planned for, that you have a group of people that are smart enough with collective knowledge. Institutional knowledge is disappearing on these boards. And
Okay.
So to answer your question, Rachel, yes, we can put that on our agenda. We have in the past put that on the agenda. That's where this list came from. We identified, we had a robust discussion. We talked about a lot of stuff. And this is the beginning.
This is the beginning.
This is the beginning of that. And, we have reached out to staff and said, hey, I know there's nothing on this agenda. Don't cancel this meeting. We want to have it as a work session so we can talk about things. We can dig deeper into our code as a commission to learn more about everything that we're supposed to apply. So we have been working on that actively for the last, I would say, 6 months or 8 months, something like that.
Well, again, I'm just saying I want to offer as much support as we can from our table to your table for those sort of activities or for staff research or things like that. And if there's any sense that, this is a bigger project we're starting, so we, I mean, up here, we have a policy that any of us can ask a department head for information on something that won't require more than 2 hours of work. And you can't do these repeatedly. But we're not isolated from asking department heads given questions or brainstorming with them. And I would just encourage you who are so much on the front lines to do that brainstorming. And feel free to bring us suggestions for code simplifications or clarifications or areas that might, with certain guidelines, allow you the little more discretion and to venture into the gray areas, as Bill's talked about, if that makes sense. I don't have any great transportation parking ideas myself.
I don't either, but I think we have staff who are much smarter in these things than we are, who can come up with, who can look at this section and give us some really good ideas. And I think it's time. I don't know when the last time this was updated, Ben.
2017.
Yeah, so,
We're different now.
Yeah.
The community has changed a lot since 2017, as we all know.
yeah. Charlie, you want to finish?
request. There's a difference between when a citizen walks in and asks something and when you ask for something. I felt that so far, you get my time, I want a little bit of information to be able to ask them a question and have some answers. A little more than a citizen, a little less than you.
Yeah.
That's all I've asked.
I tell you what, Terry, why don't you, when you write a memo asking those questions, CC me on it, and I will make sure that it gets through Pete and others that we get answers, because there's no reason for any of us to feel we're missing information, and it just takes a little research, but we'll get that to you.
And just to offer maybe another path for that, maybe it should go through Teresa and then to us, if it's for the board, right? I mean, that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But-
can talk to Charlie about that.
Yeah, no, I love basic information and facts. It makes a huge difference sometimes in how you frame an issue or how you look to a future policy. So I respect that request.
Okay.
Non-conforming,
We want to move on to the next one. So this is a topic that staff is actively working on. Haley Hart, our long-range planner, is going to be coming to the commission in May with some information and policy suggestions on nonconformities. And so again, just to introduce the topic, a nonconformity is a condition that was lawful at the time or in compliance at the time it was created, and then typically due to a code change becomes nonconforming. We have nonconforming uses, structures, and lots. I think what we're focused on for this discussion is primarily nonconforming structures. And those are the types of things that have come to the commission, where they're asked to do a special review. And sometimes it's a layered review. This came up at the first topic. You might have a special review for a nonconforming structure layered with a environmentally sensitive area. And so we're applying multiple sets of criteria, which can be a challenge. But we're going to specifically be looking at these criteria that I've included here as part of this potential code change. So that's my introduction. Couple questions. Again, we're actually already kind of working on this, but if you wanted to share any other thoughts about how nonconforming properties are reviewed, I know this is a very technical part of the code as well. And then the topic that comes up a lot is subgrade space on nonconforming properties.
yeah. I think that subgrade space should count myself. It's the intensity of use. I'm only one of 4 at the table now. I don't know if Christine had answered in on that one, but, you know, this is not the last time we'll all be discussing this.
Yeah, Christine's comments were centered around the subgrade space and just basically saying she needed some more history and rationale for this, and then be really interested in researching it and kind of discussing it more further.
Yeah, I think this topic is, it's really hard for our team to review, because there is so much detail, and it doesn't typically happen where we have just a nonconforming use. It's a nonconforming use with residential design standards, and whether or not we're hitting demo calcs, and then an ESA, and all these things go together, and ESAs are a little conflicting with nonconforming uses, and, you know, they have very specific criteria of you can't touch it at all, where nonconforming uses are like, well, you can kind of touch it, but maybe not. And I think that having staff and Haley take a look at this and really figure out which is the hierarchy, what's first? What governs? Is it nonconforming use? Is it ESA? I don't know. And I think that staff understands that and has been very supportive of us and help us figure, you know, work through those different projects that we've had in front of us.
Bill?
Were you finished?
Yes.
High level, I think we have a lot of work to do that we are doing and we're undertaking right now, and is going to take quite a lot of time on improving the level of service that we're delivering to our community in both the permitting and planning functions. I don't want to add more things that are going to distract from what I view as critical work there. I think that they seem to be simple questions and short questions, but they are not simple and short
They are not.
at all. So I think my answer to both of them is I don't want to make any changes to these things at this time. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be tackled at some point in the future. And one point of clarification, Rachel, something that you said is you think that subgrade space should count. And for everyone's benefit, I think it's worth mentioning that it does count, but in various ways depending on what topic you're talking about. So would the FAR number be the same if you were talking about that's the total square footage that you are allotted for a site, not just your above grade square footage? Yeah, it would probably have to change. You know, that's a massive reduction in the developable square footage on a house if you were to just say all you're entitled to is the FAR total. So what we have, I'm not sure is broken for basic development rights. I think that what P&Z has brought forward is a nuanced question about that, a subset of that. I just don't think it's appropriate to tackle it right now.
Yeah. Well, for me, Bill, I really appreciate your comments. I think it's more about the intensity of that floor area, and should it be then required for mitigation for affordable housing and other purposes?
It is, by the way, as of recently.
Yeah, it is. I think that this question, this specific question of subgrade space came up with a couple of projects that came up with us is, we have this box below grade. While we're not technically increasing our floor area, we are increasing our square footage, and whether or not that counts as, in my opinion, increasing a nonconformity, which is why we're asking. I'm not asking whether it should be counted 100% on every project, but whether adding square footage, regardless of where it is on the lot, below grade,
Is
above
increasing
grade, does that increase in nonconformity? And I think that's part of where this discussion went. And I've had robust discussions about this.
With staff as well.
Correct.
And I have the view that the current code is inconsistent because at one point it says that a developer can do whatever they, essentially do what they want with a non-conforming property so long as they don't increase the non-conformity. And then there's this whole special review section, which is based upon doing something different with your property. So I've had long discussions with staff as to whether a special review is even required under the code. It's not clear to me that it is. And it would be very helpful for us to at least clarify what the review standards are when we're looking at non-conforming issues.
Yeah.
This goes back to my point, is like, this is where they should have some discretion and some decision-making authority. If someone wants to move some of the square footage from this side of the house to the other side of the house, and it technically decreases the nonconformity, but they think it has a massive impact on the neighborhood and the community, they should have the discretion to say that that's a bad planning move for our community. But on the flip side, if it's technically increases the nonconformity, but actually makes for a better project today, they should have the discretion to say this makes for a better project today. That's my point, is they don't have that today, and they should have that.
Well, we've actually exercised some discretion in that regard. In one project, it was, I think staff was reading the code literally, and the way they reviewed it is that if this particular developer had not cut a door to get into an expanded basement, then it would have been fine, even though they were dramatically increasing the amount of their subspace. And it really came down to a few bricks being moved. And we thought that was ridiculous as a commission. I don't know that we were unanimous about it, but we did exercise some discretion in that event to allow we recommended the project continue and go forward despite the view of staff, which I don't think was unreasonable given the wording of the code, but we just basically disagreed with it.
Yeah. I think that when we're finding these disagreements, it'd be nice to keep a list of them and bring them up to us a little more often so they don't hit at the end of the year. And I'll call on you in just a second, John. The one thing, kind of coming back to where you first started with these projects or parcels that may have multiple review criteria, is it something that, rather than saying, well, ESA is more important than anything else or anything, is it something that, working with staff and your board at the beginning of a review, you can determine this is going to be the first priority, this is the second priority, this is the third priority, and have that individual flexibility? Because I'm sure some areas where there's an environmentally sensitive review, that's going to probably want to be number one. And is there, what I'm saying is, can you prioritize within your own review, within the code, without changing the code? And literally kind of state it up front and have an agreement among your board that we've all looked at this, there's 5 different applications that are going to, for review criteria. Should we have this be the premier, these be secondary?
Well, I think that is possible. I think that puts us in a position of saying this portion of code is not applicable when it clearly is applicable. And so I think that we need some direction from staff and maybe legal of this is how the code layers.
Okay.
Whether special review is first or ESA is first.
Right, okay.
So that the
I just was wondering,
are-
because I didn't want to lock it
Yeah.
into a formula, if then that wouldn't be the formula you would agree
Because
with.
I don't want to get it, open the city up to liability of like, well, on this project, they
chose
said this
ESA.
was this one, and on this project, they chose that,
Right.
and in my mind, they're the same kind of
Okay,
thing.
okay,
Yeah.
just kind of wondering.
Yeah.
Ben, did you have any thoughts on that, or?
Well, I was just going to respond to a couple of comments that have been made. Bill, I certainly understand kind of prioritization of our work, and certainly we're focused on some of the things that you identified. I will say on this topic, the amount of time staff spends spinning our heads on this topic, on what should be simple projects because of the nature of the code, I will say that getting some better code language on this is going to translate into more efficiency and better outcomes for our customers when they're in front of the code. That last line on this slide where we use the word hardship, staff has found themselves in several circumstances where, just as you just described, we're trying to be reasonable. There's some benefits to what the project is proposing, and we actually want to allow them to continue with their nonconformity. That presence of that hardship criteria as like a bright line for us, where there's clearly not a hardship for what they're trying to do. It's a discretionary choice that they're making. We've recommended denial on several projects that, in a reasonable test, would have passed, but because of that word right there, we recommended denial. A couple have been overturned by P&Z. I think that Ken was just alluding to, and so I do think that both from a customer service outcome, a clarity of and like a predictability of path, and also just the amount of staff time and commission time that we spend kind of spinning our wheels on this stuff, I will say that I do think this is a topic that we could find some improvements that serve both of those needs.
Okay, we'll go to John and then come back around.
I just wanted to answer the question about subgrade space, really. And this is just my personal opinion, but in my experience, I've seen it abused. I'm pretty sure there's a house in the West End that has a larger basement area than above grade space. I know of several examples of properties getting their FAR maxed out and doing a full basement, and then some of their utilities would be in that basement, and they decided, well, that's not enough room for me, so I'm going to put my utilities below the basement, which I think exacerbates hardships on all the neighbors, this incessant redevelopment. That's really all I have to say about subgrade space, but I think it should be counted.
Okay. Let me go back to Ben then from your responses on that last one. So you already know you'd like to improve the code language, and you have some ideas how to do that. Do you need to bring back a potential list of the hierarchy of the review criteria that you would suggest to clean this up? I kind of would think of environmentally sensitive areas like top of the list for me. but then, and then go down with the other items that it needs to satisfy.
Yeah, I will say we've got a policy resolution open on the nonconformities topic. You're going to see some proposed code changes coming soon. I think what Teresa was alluding to is that this topic, when it intersects with some of the other things, it just makes resolving this topic even more
Right.
difficult. It's just kind of the intersection of what's already a difficult topic with other review criteria. I might be totally wrong about this, but I think if we can make some improvements there, these intersections with other review criteria become more straightforward.
Yeah,
That's my sense.
I would agree with that.
okay,
I agree.
okay.
Yeah, and I think that another thing that tends to come up, which kind of interjects with all of this, is also if there's something in existence that happens to be in an ESA or otherwise, and then the definition of demolition is also something that
It
creates
kicks in
some
there.
issues as well at times. But yeah, there's a lot of times where something will come before us that is in existence at a certain square footage, and then as soon as they want to do X, then we literally have to review the entire thing instead of, and it might only be a small, square
De
footage
minimis.
differential, but it becomes a very large topic of contention that is sometimes very hard to, again, go back through the criteria and then determine what really needs to be determined at that moment. And usually we do have to kind of make the, determination that it can't be built, and then sometimes that creates maybe a further trickle-down effect that either they're gonna maybe do it anyway on their own terms, or, it could go sideways in a lot of directions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, because even just obtaining the status of being a non-conforming use, in theory, it is something that a community would like to see go away over time. That perhaps when the building ages out entirely and is demolished, what comes back up will be a conforming use and appropriate. And so sometimes these things are improvements to make the project or the non-conforming use last forever. And so I think that you end up with, well, how egregious is it? Is it just because it didn't have the home design review standards we now have? Or, how bad is the non-conforming, to essentially be forcing its own demise over time from neglect or not allowing simple improvements. So I don't know if there is a de minimis standard or a standard that would be for what you might call essential life-saving or life support of what the structure was built for in the first place that could be considered, or is that just opening a door you don't want to open?
We have provisions like that in the code. They could be clearer
Okay.
in terms of what classifies as, routine maintenance, for example, because we do allow that, but sometimes that's,
Well, given, say, like the fire resiliency code, what might be routine maintenance in the past now is like, we really should re-roof it with this type of material that's fire resistant. And so that would become more than just a minor thing. But I think that being able to bring up to code for life safety would make sense.
we certainly have exceptions for that.
Yeah. So do you need really more input from us on this one, or are you already feeling you have some ideas you're going to bring forward?
I think we're on a good path.
Okay, thank you. Are there others, the calculations?
This is our very last topic here
Okay,
for
yeah.
this group. And this is another section of the code that is very detailed. I think I attached the entire section for you. It's like 30-plus pages. Not because I wanted you to read it all, but just to kind of demonstrate just how detailed this section is. But again, the calcs and measures section determines how the development standards for each zone district are applied. It includes standards for measuring lot area, floor area, applying setbacks, measuring building height, determining site coverage, net leasable and net livable area. As shared in the memo, this is a highly technical and complex part of the code and has the potential to change development rights. But we do feel there's some things that could be improved just really to make it maybe more understandable and more user-friendly. And so I've asked this kind of fairly easy question to answer, but it means a lot.
Okay.
do you want the standards to be reviewed for clarity, consistency, and to make them more understandable to allied professionals and the general public? So again, it's a very impactful question, more than it seems probably.
And my answer is yes, I'd like you to do that. Other comments on this?
Well, when you phrase the question like that.
It's hard to say no to a question like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the sort of beauty of this one is in how it's implemented. Like, are we getting good feedback from the design community before we adopt these
Revised,
changes,
yeah.
right? If so, then of course, it sounds great. And if we do this right, it sounds great.
I agree with that, Bill. I think that having worked on the design side and now on the construction side, this is the section that bogs down. This is where you get your project. And it is really hard to read, it's really hard to understand, and it is the reason we have architects who can only work here, or people who cannot come in and have to hire a local architect because of this code section. And I think that it's been a long time coming in looking at it more holistically. And I know Ben does not want to allocate all of his staff time to this, but he agrees it's important.
Great. So we are in, I think, agreement about
Yes.
trying to clean this up. We're going to be a little close here on time, so we can talk to HPC, but the two comments I would make are that we really want to continue to hear from you, and when you can see improvements, or, you know, even if it's something you see, we can discuss it, and it doesn't change, that's, at least it gets discussed. And so really, we're very happy to do that. As we're doing this, the one thing I've been thinking is I think it'd be good to meet with some of the land use planners in the private sector who work through the code from their side of things to see, again, clarification, simplification, and is this code accomplishing the goal which it was written to accomplish? And spend a little time with a few of those people. I've run into, say, at Alan Richmond out and around town, and he has just said, you know, things could be a little easier to understand for people, and, you know, but people like that who've had familiarity with the code and watched it evolve and grow over 20, 30 plus years would maybe be able to give us some of the genesis of some of these things, and whether they're really obsolete now and don't need to be in the code anymore.
I agree with that. I think having the design community be involved and whether the code is meeting our current community needs
Yes.
is important.
I agree with that, and I have brought it up for our board. It's nothing that would be imminent in any way, but we are aware that we need to do a new Aspen area community plan. And I think it's important, whether, as Bill has suggested before, that we just try to surgically go in and change a few sections or update a few sections, or whether there are something that we can staff up for and prepare for in a future year, whether it's 2027 or 2028. I think it really needs to be looked at. And the issue that is predominant for so many people is the rate of growth, the rate of change. And do we need to leave this door open for me that says, hey, we need 40 new beds every year, you know, and nobody applied for them. They go away, but there they are next year. And why are we saying that when we can't handle the parking already, we can't handle the congestion, we won't have the workforce for much more growth as it is, despite our best efforts. So I think that at least considering looking at some of our GMQS and some things like that to be a better match with our community might be an interim step. And so I'll just put that out there, and then I'm going to turn it back to you all, each individually, if you'd like to give us some closing comments on the discussion.
Charlie, do you want to start off?
Be careful in changing existing rules and code. They were put in there by very smart people, or this is the same intelligence we have. There was a lot of deliberation and thought. And unless we know why certain things were done, we don't have a clue as to how we should change or not change it.
Right.
If we just look at something and say, they said 6'2", we don't like 6'2", we need to know why they said 6'2".
I agree.
Okay, and because they thought about it long and hard before they said 6'2". And just because the last 2 years everybody says 6'2" is dumb, we need to know the genesis of the rule, why it came from, because institutional knowledge, this is my 40-some years of sitting in these meetings, and back then, I think there was more institutional knowledge. People stuck around these boards longer, and the room was filled with older people who had, so you got a better feel for why it was done a certain way. And it's just very important to not throw that out. That's all.
Thank you.
I would point out, we are the older people now.
We know it, but we're not very smart anymore.
Hi, Roger.
Hey, Roger. Ken?
Older people.
Well, the only closing comment I would have is that I enjoyed having this session. I think that what I take away, beginning with Bill's comments, is the need for us to think more about how we can help you and tee up some issues that we see through our work that could use, the elected officials' input.
Thank you on that. Mary Ann?
Yeah, I really appreciate everybody's time. I know I've been. Better?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, I really appreciate your time, Mayor, and all of council, and all of the hard work that, you individually are doing on a consistent basis. So thank you each, as well as our city attorneys and, all the staff as well. You guys really put in a lot of time and effort into, our packets and all of the sessions that we do have. And I appreciate, the maybe notion of potential more authority to potentially be able to make things colored instead of the black and the white, like was suggested earlier. And yeah, cleaning up, I think, some of, the things that we're working off of the land use and the Aspen area plan as well. So I think that that's probably a big task, but I also know that, we do have a lot of technology things happening today, and with, smart sense of great attorneys and things like that, that have a lot of background knowledge like you're suggesting. I do think that there is a notion and a chance to maybe efficientize some things moving forwards, and to certainly make, our ability to make good decisions a little bit easier and more streamlined. So thank you all.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Council and Mayor Richards. I think this was really important, and I look forward to having more of them and maybe a little bit more informal. This felt very
Yeah.
formal.
It was
And
formal.
I think that in the past, it's been council inviting P&Z and saying, come over, let's talk about how it's going. Let's talk about our goals and how we would like to utilize your commission. And I would like your feedback, and I would like it more often, because I think we would be a better commission
We
with
will
more
find a way
feedback.
to make that scheduling. It's been a hectic year overall, but we have got some good things moving forward, and we have some good people on staff. Ben's fully staffed up now at ComDev for the first time in a long time, and that makes a difference. We have a new permanent city manager here, which makes a real difference, and we're just moving forward. We've added some really good staff with P&Z, with our ComDev, so we're happy to do this. John, you have something, and then anybody else is closing?
Yeah, just wanted to add that it seems like everybody here is in agreement that planning and zoning would like a little more responsibility, and we would like to give you more responsibility.
Great. Thank you so much.
Any closing comments over here? Okay. Great. Well, we'll take a real quick little 4 or 5 minute break and then come over with HPC if you guys want to come up, and we'll get your name tags out.
We miss having you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Aspen City Council work session. It's about 5:30 on April 13th, and we're now going to have a conversation with our Historic Preservation Commission. And thank you guys for sitting through and listening to us talk with P&Z. Probably similar concerns. So, Dan, we'll let you take it away and see where we
Yeah,
ended
we've
up.
got a couple slides to go through, but why don't we start with introductions? We've got everyone seated at the dais here.
Okay.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi again. It's been a minute. Cara Thompson, Chair, Architect.
Kim Raymond, Vice Chair, Architect.
Jillian White, Historic Preservation Officer, staff.
Barb Pitchford.
Roger Moyer.
Roger.
Klaus.
Dakota Severe, and I'm a mom.
I was going to say, nobody said anything about it themselves.
We like
so-
to keep it efficient. We know we have a lot to talk about.
Okay. Good. There we go. You know
Share the
us.
screen here.
Happy to expand if you want to know more.
See if it's the right one. Go. All right, so we've just got a couple topics we're going to talk about together. The first one is kind of a report out on our TDR program. There we go. So we're going to talk about transferable development rights, or the TDR program, and then we're going to have a discussion, brief discussion about the design guidelines and some potential areas to look at some revisions.
Do you mind if I?
Please go ahead. Yep.
We wanted to keep this more of like a casual conversation. We're not looking for exact feedback right now on design guidelines. We understand you want some information on TDRs, which I also think will help our board and to have an open discussion. And then we just have some thoughts on what we'd like to get into with staff on our design guidelines that we'll go through with you. But I think P&Z had a lot more very specific questions than, and we will be a little bit more casual here.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So we've done a couple different ones this year, and some questions have come up, so we thought the timing was right to give you an overview of the program. So the Transferable Development Right Program was started in 2003 by Ordinance 54. Again, the purpose is to encourage historic preservation by permitting owners to sever and convey development rights in 250 square foot increments. The first certificate was approved in 2004. Over the life of the program, we've had 135 certificates issued at 39 unique properties. 68 of 135 certificates have landing sites, so they've actually been officially transferred off of a property onto another. One of the requirements is that folks give us a report on when they sell or convey a certificate to another party. And so we have had 62 reported valuations, I call them, and they range from $153,000 to $700,000. We're going to show you a great graph here that kind of maps it over time. And if you do the average, it averages down near the lower end, $274,818 on average. So we've got this great map, which was created by one of our planners, Harry, who's in the back of the room. Harry Valentine Wilson, one of our more recent hires, local Flagstaff young man who grew up here in Aspen.
Aspen.
Or, I'm sorry, Aspen. I did it. It's been over a year. I think it's the first time I've said the wrong city. He's local from Aspen, yes. He grew up here in Aspen, so we're happy to have Harry. Send me back now. Yes. Yeah, send me back, sorry. My foot in my mouth. So as you can see on the map here, the blue dots are the sending sites. So those are properties where a TDR certificate was generated from. And then the brown dots are the landing sites. And it's not the closest, but you can kind of see, as we would anticipate, a lot of it is happening in the West End. That's where the majority of our historic properties exist. There are some sending sites over on the east side of town a little bit. And then the landing sites as well, I would say a pretty good distribution throughout the West End and kind of downtown.
Yeah, I had kind of counted them up, and there's an awful lot that land outside of the West End of the 39 that have been done. And I was kind of wondering, I realized I wrote on a different computer, so I might not have gotten the answer. But do we know how many other historic properties we have that might come in the future for a TDR or to be a landing site, who have not yet redeveloped?
That, oh, what were you gonna say? I was just gonna say, that's something we've been looking into, kind of getting the data on that, but we don't have that right now. There are several properties that could still sever TDRs, but we don't have that data currently.
Yeah, no, and I was just, I know it was very rough back of the cocktail napkin type of math to say, well, if there were X many that have already landed that have been 250 square feet each, that's about 17,500 square feet going into other neighborhoods. And that, when they land in the West End, maybe that's where they came from, but the other neighborhoods, there's that balance. At what point are we saving the character of one neighborhood at the detriment of character of other neighborhoods with oversized homes? So.
Yeah, so what you're looking at is, again, the 135 TDRs on 39 sites. 68 TDRs have been landed on 55 different sites, so that's what's being reflected here.
Did you guys look at, is there an equal balance between the neighborhoods? Like, to me, up there on the map, it looks like there's an equal amount of sending sites and receiving sites in each neighborhood.
We've not done that kind of analysis, kind of neighborhood by neighborhood, but we could break that down a little more.
And I would also, and I had a similar question when I first saw this map, each of those dots is identifying a site, not necessarily a certificate, or not necessarily a TDR, so you might have a dot that represents on the landing sites, the most any neighborhood would be 2 per property, but a sending site could be doing several.
6 or 7, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that
there's some more information that could be.
A little more color coding.
Size of dots.
Size of dots, maybe.
Yeah, we could resize the dots to reflect multiple certificates.
Yeah.
So we'll keep working on this. I think it is a good source of information. And then the next is a graph of the valuation. And so along the bottom, you have the years starting in 2012. You see the first, it looks like 3 certificates. And on the left axis, you've got the valuation starting from 100,000 up to 700,000. And so really you can see it's maybe as anticipated, it was fairly stable between 2012 and 2020. And then 2021 is where you really start to see some of the valuations really jump up over 400,000, I think, in 2021. First one over 500,000 in 2023. And you can see in 2024, there's a couple up over 600,000. And so the demand, or I should say the value, has seemed to increase over time.
Yeah. Does that somewhat track with the construction floor area values that we see, when you hear it's 3,000 square feet or something like that as a construction or a resale price? Do you think the square footage in the TDRs is tracking with the market per se?
Well, I'm not sure what the relevance of the value of the TDR is. Sorry. I'm not sure what the relevance of the value is, other than it demonstrates that the program's working. If people are appreciating what this offering is and therefore encouraging others to create them. But I think the simple answer, the direct answer to your question is like the real estate market moves up and to the right in Aspen, and
So does this.
so does this.
Okay. Just kind of wondering. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a commodity and people are still making money on it. For example, if cost of construction averages right now at $2,000 a square foot, these cost $1,000 a square foot, and you could sell that home for $4,000 a square foot, you're still making money on it.
Yeah, and that's kind of been something that is just an interesting conflict, I think, of getting bonus floor area to help pay for the project or do what you want, and at the same time, a TDR bonus to sell for FAR off the site. And so I'm just kind of seeing this continual, and especially when these things come through in maybe 2 phases, where, now they want the TDR and they'll later decide if they want the floor area bonus, or they want the floor area bonus now and then they want to sell the TDR. And it's like, at what point are we just kind of creating speculation in historic preservation as opposed to the desire to really restore a historic home.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I might be jumping ahead, Dan. Let me know if you want to
I
keep
think this is all
going.
this is really all we had. The next topic is the design guidelines, so this is a good
Perfect.
point to have a discussion on it.
Okay, so the intersection that we normally, there are two kind of pain points, I think, that we normally see on TDRs. And I would first say that I think the program is extremely beneficial. It really does help development sites where you have a large historic house that takes up most of the footprint of a small lot that was historically created, where you can't have future development, or we won't allow you to have development of a size that would impact the aesthetics of the resource and overwhelm the mass and scale. But the two places we see the intersection are the number, I think, of TDRs that people are requesting per property. Sometimes we've seen some properties request 6 or 7, and there's no guidelines, there's no language in the code limiting the number of TDRs that can be requested. And then the intersection with floor area bonuses. And if you're being awarded a floor area bonus, a TDR being granted is also an additional bonus. Does that TDR square footage, or does that bonus square footage have to land on the property? Can that square footage become part of a TDR? And those are things that are very vague in the code that we discuss at our meetings that we do believe need some clarification and direction, honestly, from you guys for what you want to see. I would not want to see the program go away. I think it's productive. It's doing what it needs to do. But I think we can set some more parameters around it on those 2 points.
Cara, do you mind if I make a clarifying point? There is a maximum TDRs per property for most properties unless it's within a designation negotiation.
For landing or sending?
For sending sites and landing sites.
Oh,
For both.
definitely for landing.
The only time where there's no criteria for how many can be severed is when it's part of a designation of an Aspen modern property. That's part of a negotiation period where they can pretty much ask for as many as they would like, and that's where there's no real criteria around whether or not the HPC should say no or yes or no.
Thank you for that clarification.
So, sorry, just to expand on that, so like for an empty lot, that one that we recently saw, I don't know if we're allowed to.
Empty lot. Oh, yes. They had a set amount based on their square footage.
Right, so it's just
And
based
zoning.
on their square footage.
Based on the zoning you're in and the size of the lot.
Right, but you can only sever the amount over that you're on, the unused floor area.
Correct.
But there's no limitation on saying, okay, it's an empty lot and you can sever all of your square
There is.
footage.
There is a maximum. It's 2. 2 is the most for most zone properties. I think depending on the zone district you're in.
For landing or sending?
She's saying for sending.
For sending, yeah.
How'd they get 6?
You could go in 250 square foot increments, you can go up to the allowable floor area.
Oh, sorry, I'm thinking of landing sites.
No, I was like,
Sorry, I drove up
there
from the
we
front
go.
range
Thank
today,
you.
and then
So it's an
brain's catching
unlimited
up.
number that they
Unlimited
can, but
to
limited
create.
by the FAR that would be allowed
yes,
on the lot.
yes,
size.
okay.
Sorry, I hope that didn't cause too much confusion.
Thank you.
I was like,
I would just suggest that when we're talking about this, we think more about it not in the terms of should this person be allowed to sever unlimited number of TDRs, but do we value an undeveloped lot adjacent to a historic resource? Or do we value less development on the same lot adjacent to a historic resource? That's the question, and that's the way we should be talking about it, in my opinion. Not about these sort of intangible, imaginary certificate things that really don't mean that much to somebody who isn't extremely familiar with this program. So it's more about thinking about this in practical terms, not in terms of whether this is going to enrich somebody or not. That's sort of irrelevant to me. It's more about the actual impact on the community and on the historic resources.
Yeah.
I think that part of it's really good. I mean, both in the HPC guidelines and in the land use code, it says that the city is very committed to helping people preserve the historic buildings. And sometimes this is the best way to help them, because some of the benefits over the last 30 years have kind of diminished for HPC, for people doing historic preservation. So I think TDRs is one nice way to let them, help them
Yeah.
with these preservation
Yeah,
efforts.
and I can support the concept of the program. I've supported TDRs in the past. What has been confusing to me is we want the TDR to take growth off the site, and we want a floor area bonus to put it back on the site. And that just doesn't make sense. It seems to me it should be one bonus or the other, that you want the bonus FAR because make it more livable and a more modern home. That will work for us. That's what we want. No, we don't need all the FAR that normally comes with this lot. We want to preserve the home as it is. We get the financial help of selling a TDR or two off the property. But the idea that you can get a bonus of FAR and sell FAR off the same property at the same time is just incongruous to me. And I'd love to see a list in the future of any of the historic preservation benefits or, incentives that you've had that have gone away. So, or maybe they're just not as valuable.
bring that to you,
I don't
yeah.
know if they're federal tax code or their local code, but would love to have us look at what you've lost.
Yeah. One thing on the FAR bonus or getting a TDR, sometimes those go hand in hand. If they just need a little bit of floor area to make something work, and then the bonus, the TDR is sometimes part of that bonus, and it's kind of the same thing, getting a TDR, getting floor area. Maybe they want to sell 250 square feet, but they need 50 square feet to make the design they have work. So you can have up to 300 square feet of bonus floor area on a certain size lots. So getting both actually kind of goes with the code.
Well, I guess that's where I'm questioning the code, and are we getting what we really want out of this? We're seeing, things really heavily maximized in a way. And every TDR that goes over into the east end of town or somewhere else is getting a house without any historic character to be a lot bigger and more obtrusive into that neighborhood. And so that's why I've kind of asked, well, how many more are out there? I mean, how many might there be? And that, helps determine the equity and the fairness of that bonus. But are you not allowed to just give someone a 50 square foot floor area bonus so that then they have what they need to live and not have the extra bonus to sell as a TDR?
Yes.
You can do that, but then that's kind of taking part of the incentive away if they're doing a major restoration and putting a lot of effort and time, money, and everything into it. One person gets a 300 square foot bonus, and this person just needs 50 square feet and would like the whole 300 square foot bonus that's allowed to that lot, and then they could divide it as 50 square feet that they need and 250 square feet that they could sell. To me, that makes sense, because they're getting the 300 square foot bonus that they've earned. It's not like we're just handing them out. They have to do enough to the building to deserve or earn the bonus. But that's, I think, Rachel, just how sometimes they get both. But if they just ask for 3 TDRs to sell just so they can sell them, I can see where that gets to be a problem.
Well, what I'm hearing from you, Rachel, is I think I kind of agree with you. The intersection between the floor area bonus and the TDRs needs to be studied more and likely clarified in bonus criteria in the code. And that's something you would support. Is that something all of council would support us looking into with staff?
Whoever, do you want to go first, or whoever wants to go first?
Yeah, I think there should be some limitations.
Or some work on the intersection between the two.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think there's some language within the code, within the TDR section, that's a little bit conflicting and confusing. So I think looking into that more and maybe clarifying a little bit, because there's some language that says like TDRs should not include the potential of floor area bonuses, and the way it's written, in my opinion, is a little bit confusing for the HPC, for applicants, for staff sometimes. So I do think it would be good to look into further.
Again, same goals as with P&Z, clarity, simplification. Are we accomplishing the goals with this incentive? So you guys are okay with looking at that intersection a little more carefully?
Ben, did you want to say something?
No, I think there's a couple of things, but one thing is most of the code, and I'd go back to some of the code we talked about in the last discussion as well, has been on the books for 20 and 30 years now. And I think with staff turnover, I think with members of the commission turning over, I think members of our design profession and planning profession turning over kind of over time. To Charlie's point earlier, I think there's been a lot of institutional memory loss. And so some of this language to previous staff and previous commission members, it was crystal clear. And now I think in a game of telephone over time, some of that clarity has just been lost in practice. And so, I think that's part of the story here, because a lot of this language has been in place for a long time, and I think it's welcome to be revisited.
Yeah, and then the only other piece is, the number of TDRs, and we don't see, the landing sites. I've, as an architect, I've utilized TDRs on projects, and they are, I know they have a high dollar value. They're quite small.
They're quite small.
They're very small. It's like I don't know, it's less than a bedroom square footage.
Not if you live in deed-restricted housing.
Not if you live in
I'm sorry, a
deed-restricted-
lot of us have really small bedrooms.
I'm with you, Rachel. I'm in affordable housing as well. And that would be half the size of my apartment.
Yes, exactly.
But for the homes for the owners that can purchase these, they're, in the scheme of the size of the house, it is a very small percentage. And I would, I guess, challenge you to go buy these homes and see if you can even tell which ones have received TDRs. Because
Some are going to work it in really well, and some aren't. And, part of the dilemma is that the city of Aspen proper then annexed all of the east end of town, which is not a grid system roads. They're not wider roads. They're not, you have much smaller lots in some parts of town than others. So it becomes more noticeable in some parts of it. Landing one of these in the West End, not really that big a deal. Landing them in some of the other areas would be.
Yeah, for sure. And there are lots of criteria for landing sites. I don't know if we'll get into that, but.
Well, I think our dimensional standards, otherwise, height and site coverage and those kinds of things are constraining factors as well in terms of the impacts of that additional floor area on a landing site.
Yeah. Yeah, I would be mostly interested to understand if you guys would continue to agree that sites can sever as many TDRs as they want as long as they're not using the floor area on the lot. Like, should there be, and I don't know that that's a piece that impacts us terribly, because we don't, like I said, we don't see the receiving sites. We don't, but is that something that council would care to address in a code to say, a maximum of X percentage of your square footage can be severed as TDRs?
Again, if and when we discuss that, I'm open to discussing it, but we need to talk about it in terms of the lot that would be severing those TDRs was created from a historic lot split. So it is adjacent to a historic resource. Do we value empty space next to the historic resource? That's the question we're ultimately asking. I'm totally open to the discussion. I don't really know my answer to it yet, but talking about it in terms of anything else, I think, is counterproductive.
Yeah. And I don't know how many of those vacant lots you really have left in the historic neighborhoods. We did support and agreed with the TDRs for the one with a big corner house, and it's beautiful, and I understand why. But I did have to look at the old Sanford map and all the vacant lots versus what we have today and think, are we really ever going to get back to that character no matter how many TDRs we throw at the problem? The West End's going to develop.
And I guess I would just say it's not just empty lots. The other project that's coming to mind that requested, I don't know, 4 or 6 was Ann Mullen's house. That's a developed lot.
Yeah.
It's not just developed lots that are severing large numbers of.
Right.
It's not just undeveloped lots that are requesting severing these large number of TDRs. So.
Yeah, no, and that's the type of circumstance that very clearly it's maintaining the historic character of the house.
Yes.
As opposed to we want a new addition on the back or additional type of things. I don't have an answer to your question. I'd really like to have staff kind of take a look, and are there vacant lots that could send 12 TDRs or 10 or 15, or I'm worrying about something that doesn't exist. I don't know if there should be a ratio or a cap at a certain top end or not.
Okay. I think it's something we can work with staff on and then come back to you guys. Does anybody else from our board want to make any TDR comments before we move on?
Roger?
When you make a rule, someone is always trying to figure a way around the rule.
Yeah.
So when you think of institutional knowledge and what's gone over the years, it would be interesting, and I don't think many people have misused the TDRs particularly, but it would be interesting to see if in fact they have, and what implications that's had on, say, a neighborhood that's not historical. Your comment was interesting earlier when you thought you would take square footage from one part of town and put it into another part of town, and that might impact the other part of town. It's a good thought, but I'm not sure that that's actually happening. But it wouldn't hurt to examine the fact that that's happening, and that would, there aren't many people that are still in the planning department that have a lot of history. Obviously one, and that makes it more difficult. As far as TDRs go, I think they've been a great boon to restoring a lot of historic properties. And our chairman's point is well taken, and I think a good one. It's pretty, I don't think it's very serious, terribly serious, but confusing. And anytime you can keep something simple, it's much better. And going back to the historic house and the historic lot, it's too bad when we started HPC in the late 70s that the whole town wasn't designated.
Yeah.
And a great example of one of those instances is if you go to the block on Catherine Thalberg's house. Was it Spring or Hyman? It's Spring Street, isn't it? Catherine Thalberg's house was on the corner. There was a vacant lot. Next was Christy Keena's house, which we've just looked at recently, Sheriff Keena's house. And then the next house was in the 50s, a historic house that was pretty much New Englandized, but still those were basically historic structures. And then my good friend, who's not longer here, bought that lot and built a monstrosity house in between all of those and totally disrupted the character of the lot. And at the time, there was nothing we could do about it. And I'm not sure if we can do about it, anything we could do about it again, is there? And that was actually, when that happened, that brought me to maybe want to be on HPC. And it was mind-blowing how that could happen.
Yeah.
And then the other issue over the years is the building that's built behind a historic structure. And of course, initially they were allowed to connect. They just added on. Now we have a separation. We've done a lot of work in that regard, but a lot of those structures are immensely large.
Yes.
And of course, that has to do with the amount of square footage they could use, which was perhaps originally too much. And but I think we're past that. I don't think there'll be many more of those problems coming up. So it's fun to sit here and
Look at,
with P&Z and the discussion, and I think it's really important that we're here. And I think, as P&Z said, I think we should have more of these. I mean, an hour and a half in an evening every few months is certainly, I think, very worthwhile to both us and to you.
yeah, no, we're working to really try to squeeze a lot more in. We had a little catching up to do when we first got in, but I agree. And I've wanted to do that with some of our departments too, just, familiarity with the staff and the departments and what they're doing. So it's not always just coming up when there's a new issue or a crisis or something like that. And, let me add this maybe. I guess I've had some sensitivity from being on the county board and dealing with county TDRs, which are a significantly larger chunk. But the problem is that, in the county, it's preserving open space, view plains, wildlife habitat, things like this, some of the historic ranches. And then it all ends up on houses up Castle Creek Road. And the complaints from the public about the size of these homes and the lack of the character and the things like this, because those people don't necessarily see the 40 acres that was preserved. And so it's how do you really make that connection for people that, yeah, I can accept this trade-off because of these greater benefits that occur. And so again, maybe that's my sensitivity to how wildly you use and how available are TDRs, because people do notice house sizes and they do notice what happens in their neighborhoods, and maybe less so in the West End because everyone's got these nice big lots, you know, and but other parts of town not so much. So I'll let that go. And did we get enough feedback on that topic, you thought?
So, yeah.
Okay.
We ready to move on to the design guidelines?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I think I'm going to turn this over to Jillian.
Yeah, like Cara said, we're just kind of, the HPC is looking for some support to potentially update the guidelines. And so a little context, there was initial guidelines created in 1986. They were updated in 2000 and went to City Council then for adoption in 2016. And then minor amendment in 2024 is the most recent update, which just added, I think, one sentence, so not a major update. The document, the Historic Preservation Design Guidelines document provides background on the city's preservation program and local history, and presents design guidelines that articulate policies for the treatment of locally designated historic properties and districts. It has 12 chapters with 116 individual guidelines ranging from site planning to door hardware, windows, roof materials, new additions, so pretty much everything you can think of. Currently, updates to the guidelines or the creation of a supplemental document would be helpful to speak to evolving energy code requirements, wildfire resiliency considerations, and various topics within the guidelines that could be further expanded upon to assist not only applicants but the HPC and staff in evaluating projects and also creating efficiencies in the process. The HPC, like I said, would like council support on this, but I'm sure Cara and Kim or anyone on the commission can add any thoughts that you have on our guidelines that you might want some feedback on or general support of updating.
Yeah, I would just add some of the things that I think we have to address are the wildfire, energy code requirements. Our guidelines do conflict with recently
Single-pane
adopted.
historic windows versus having a
Yeah.
energy efficient
Exactly,
windows.
and one of the pieces, just to get a little specific, one of the elements is, you know, we want homes to be insulated better to be able to comply with new requirements. There are code exceptions for historic structures, but the current standard for a new structure is to have insulation on the outside of your building before you have the siding. That's not something that we have ever wanted to do with our historic buildings, because we don't really want people removing the siding if they don't have to. And then if they do want to add that insulation, it adds thickness, it changes proportion, it has lots of trickle-down effects to the to maintaining, you know, the character of these resources. So we'd like to study that and also look into how we can achieve better fire ratings. I know there are upcoming code changes to some of that, and we just want to be ahead of it. The design guideline update that we had made was related to roof materials. So now we've been allowing some synthetic shingles, which previously was very specifically prohibited.
It was a no-no.
By our guidelines. I don't know if you've seen any of the projects that have received the shingles. I think there's just one or two that are.
Two that have actually been implemented, but a
been
few that have been
implemented.
approved. Yeah.
So it's still, we've approved more than that, but so we'll be watching them closely to see how how the public reacts. The bigger guideline or the bigger piece of the guidelines that we as a board, I think, continuously struggle with is, and it's not always relevant, but the projects that come through our board that are in the commercial core or mixed-use districts or multifamily districts that allow for a lot more floor area than the standard residential properties that we see. So what we've discussed is potentially adding a chapter to better expand on mass and scale guidelines for those types of projects. And that would probably be the biggest thing that we've discussed. We haven't started a draft or anything like that, but we've talked about it with staff, and maybe Ben can expand.
Yeah, I think the scenario that's being described is on Main Street in our mixed-use zone district, and in our RMF, our residential multifamily zone district, where the city has long incentivized additional density and intensity on a property to build multifamily units. And we have lovely Victorian miners' cottage or small, what had been single-family residences, and I think those lots are also places where there's opportunity to build affordable housing. And so we've had several projects in the last few years where there's been big disagreement on HPC about what the appropriate mass and scale is in developing affordable housing related to miners' cottages. And, you know, there's some good projects that are in the pipeline that I think, from an affordable housing perspective, are great projects. From a preservation evaluation, I think there's been some real concerns from the commission about whether or not those projects are appropriate adjacent to a Victorian miner's cottage. And so I think it's, and I'm going to make the connection. I think on the topic of fire resiliency, we've got some important trade-offs that we need to evaluate as a community as we try to find balance on these two topics. And the guidelines are pretty good, but they don't give these folks very much space or guidance about how to make those trade-offs on behalf of the community. There's a lot of tension on those things.
Yeah, I mean, side comment that's similar is us looking with the Parks Department on our tree removal code, so that it's easier to remove the trees that are true fire hazards, yet still have the replacement fee for trees that you're just trying to improve the development logistics of the site that are not fire hazards. So I think we're very much open to looking at modifications as required and supported by fire danger in our community. We don't want to lose all the historic structures because we were unwilling to bend on a place where we need to bend a little bit for fire and that sort of disaster opportunities. So I think we're very open to that. And then the other comment you were questioning about, I would like to turn to Ben and say, Ben, are you bringing this to us so that we can say, yes, please start this kind of work for the HPC?
I think so. You know, I think these are, again, they're big trade-off conversations that I think the community has to have. And, you know, I think the design guidelines have been very clear. I think when you apply them, both, you know, on these topics where there's trade-offs, whether they be building performance from an energy perspective, and the preservation of historic materials that are in wall structures, wall assemblies that we'd like to try to keep, there's trade-offs there. There's trade-offs in
Density on Main Street.
and density on Main Street, and there's trade-offs in, you know, the degree to which we're willing to make homes more fire resilient. I would argue that putting plastic on historic resources as a substitute for historic materials, I don't think is as fire resilient as maybe some people think that it is. But that's been the proposal that we've seen from folks who are wanting to try to keep a historic look by making things more fire resilient. I don't know that putting plastic on a building as an alternative is
They have to use
slate or metal or cement board or something else that I think would be really contrary to design guidelines. So again, I think on all these topics, I think we're probably asking whether or not council, on behalf of the community, is interested in having a conversation about trade-offs.
What do you guys think?
Yes.
Yes? Yeah.
I'm going to say yes. I think we obviously need to make changes to HPC codes just to address the fire dangers that are getting worse and worse every year, like the possibility of metal roofs at some point, fireproof siding, and being able to insulate historic homes. I think these are important things that we need to find a way forward to, but it's going to be tricky because they are historic.
Yeah. But I think there is agreement on this board to take a look at these things, work with us, future work sessions. When you get to the sticky wickets, we're happy to try to help out, and whatever resources, Ben, you might need to actually do this on top of your existing workload, please come back to us, because I don't want it to get buried by daily workload, and we want to give you guys the support you need.
I will say that we have been trying to resolve the wall assembly question about how to better insulate wall assemblies 10 years, 12 years?
We had a bit of an issue.
Yeah, I will say it's really difficult. Well, there's a couple difficulties to this work. One is I think, and there's folks in this room that can speak to this much more directly than I can, but on some of these trade-offs, the preservation community has not landed on best practices across the country, like period, end of story. I think if you talk about the National Trust, talking about roofing materials, or talking about siding, there just hasn't been somebody said, this is the trade-off that we need to make. And then also finding experts that are skilled enough, savvy enough, that can step in and say, from a building performance perspective, from a preservation perspective, this is the best outcome. Those two things are challenges to us in this work. Just because the real dilemmas that I think the industry is struggling with.
Well, it sounds like the industry is evolving, but it's afraid to take the wrong step, and that's similar to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's take a stab at it, see what we can come up with, and see, what we can come up with as best practices for our community and for our unique situation.
I do think that we've gone about this so far as thoughtfully as we could have. There are other communities that have just said, okay, yeah, go ahead and put, the plastic roofs on all your resources, that's okay. And we're not saying that. We're saying that when an old material or a historic material does not exist anymore, we're saying, okay, this is an acceptable method. Alternative. And we're going to have to continue to address, the requests from applicants as they come through and make sure we're doing the right thing. But this is a big effort, and it is not an inexpensive effort. And we do have a fund of fees that we can utilize, but we want to be mindful of all that.
We have some resources too, so we want to make sure, again, it's not bogged down, that it moves forward, not hasty, but in a deliberate manner.
Yeah. I do want to note, I know Ben and Dan will not agree with me on this, but I have the opportunity, so I'm going to speak up. We have one HPC staff member, Jillian, right now. Our other staff member has recently departed, and there has been an immense amount of turnover in HPC staff in the last 6 years. So these items that are on our list are not new. They've been on our list for 6+ years. And we have not had the ability to get traction on them because there is a substantial amount of workload on Jillian's plate right now. I understand that we are utilizing other staff to attempt to help Jillian, but we lost a significant amount of institutional knowledge with Amy, Simon, and then with Sarah Yoon. I know that fully staffed for historic preservation means 2 people. I think that's ridiculous. I think that it's a 3-person minimum group that needs to exist. Amy created the program. She was 2 people. She had so much knowledge. She was 2 people. So even with filling the 1 position that is available, I would just like to advocate that I know it's extremely hard to fill these positions, that I think Jillian needs more than 1 person helping her.
Okay, I'm going to agree with you on that, and I'm going to agree with you that we need to take our time to get the right person who's knowledgeable and who will stick, because you just don't want to spend 6 months or 9 months with someone who then leaves the community for their own other reasons. I do have to say this, and I keep it in mind for everything we're doing right now. We've barreled along for 30 or 40 years with a few blips here with 9/11 and the economy or COVID or something. But the economy has me a little on edge right now about people's travel plans when gas hits $5, $6 a gallon, whether you know, we have an airport closing coming up, we have tariffs, we have a war. And so I know that I'm hesitant about wanting to hire and expand staff, even I can look at a few other areas where I think we might need it. But we'll take it under consideration and think about it. But, you know, the last thing I think anyone on this board wants to do is end up being in a position of reductions in force just 6 months after you start hiring people. And so it's just worth paying attention to what's going on nationally right now and hoping for the best.
I'd like to echo Kara's comments, and I'd like to add, I think all commissions should be involved in the hiring process. And in all the years I've lived here, that's not been the case. When Amy was hired, we actually were consulted a little bit, but not sufficiently. And I think I would have, from some of the hires that we had, I wouldn't have.
You wouldn't have hired them?
No.
Okay.
And the one difficulty for the school district and for you as well, or the city, is housing.
It's for everyone.
And that's almost an insurmountable mountain in front of hiring. But nevertheless, when it comes to hiring staff to help Jillian or anyone else, I think at least 2 or 3 members of our commission should be part of that process.
You know, I'm not going to weigh in on that one way or the other without talking to Ben first and the rest of the council. But I can appreciate your bringing that up. There's times when that can be really helpful. And thinking about manager hiring process, you often will run them through a citizen group and a staff group and a council or BOCC group.
Comment regarding that. When I was on the original Aspen Art Museum board.
Okay.
And hired the original art museum person. And I brought in, I also brought in other board members. And one of the board members I brought in was a really immensely successful businessman and artist. And I asked him about hiring process, and he gave me a tip. And he said, ultimately, if you can put enough pins in the applicant so that they react and even become perhaps a little intimidated or angry, you find out a lot more about the person that you're going to hire. And I've used that in my own business and other instances, and it does work. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Always helpful. Always helpful. Do you have other topics for us at this time?
No, that was it, but I did, before we skipped ahead on the guidelines, I didn't ask, do any of the other board members want to expand on any of the guideline discussion?
No, I just want to thank council for giving us the opportunity to have the conversation, because sometimes the guidelines, as Ben said and Cara said, they seem in conflict with some of the zoning, and we kind of scratch our heads and go, well, how do we do this? So it's time to kind of reset it, relook at it, and like you said, simplify it and clean it up for us.
Yeah.
And the biggest conflict that I think we've had in my tenure is with affordable housing and wildfire mitigation.
Yeah.
You know, that we have this huge affordable housing that completely overwhelms an historic structure. And the number one guideline is don't overwhelm the historic structure. But we have an affordable housing issue. So it helps to have the conversation to say, help us navigate this and understand how to make the right decision for the community. So thank you.
Thank you. And I was going to ask the same thing, whether you have comments on the guidelines or just general broad comments for us. We'd really appreciate hearing from you.
I would just like to say thank you, too, for giving us the opportunity to come and chat with you. You guys have a really hard job. Staff has a hard job, and they're overwhelmed because there's so much work. The workload has gone up for everybody over the years since I've been doing this. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate all the hard efforts. What I've seen a lot with the historic preservation stuff is the wildfire and the energy efficiency. That's kind of the biggest thing that people call me about just out of the blue. What are we going to do? So I think that's a really big one that we need to address.
I have a comment for everyone.
Okay.
More for the city. Would you put the map up of the dots?
Sure.
I'm going to tell you a little story. A few years ago, a friend of mine who has a realtor made a logo for his business. And on the table, it looked marvelous. And I smiled as I looked at it, and I said, take this and pin it up on the wall over there. And tell me if you think that's the logo you want to put out. Well, you couldn't read it. So when you look at the map with the dots, the brown and the blue are unreadable. Now, if you notice, the border around the map is a bright color, it's red. So the dots should have been red or pink or yellow, or maybe even purple, but light purple. And if you notice, the light blue up in the top of that map was readable, but the dots, in fact, were not. So that's just something that'll help the design community when the next gentleman goes to do his presentation, that remember how color can look good on the table, but put it up on the wall to make sure it's going to be readable.
Yeah, I believe that.
Thank you, Roger.
I've seen some designs over time that look simply wonderful, and then you see them after construction and not so much. Okay, well, anyhow, I think we remember the image.
We can update that. That was just an image of the interactive GIS map, so we can update that so that it's more legible and send it out.
Okay, that'd be good. And we talked a little earlier on that too,
Yeah.
between how many they can send and receive.
Yeah, scale.
And thanks for having us.
You're welcome. Thank you guys all for your commitment and your time to our community. Dakota?
I actually wanted to say, I think the mass and the scale and the wildfires, those are the three biggest issues. And I know when I was even interviewed for this board, those were the things that were asked of me or asked in the interview, and they are still something that we really struggle with. But I think we did a really good job with the roofing shingles and coming up with designs, but I think each project is still taken bit by bit, and we really look at the shingles and make sure that they're matching the historic, and maybe even with that part, especially the roofing, just because it seems something that's coming up so much because they no longer can use some of the historical material, we should make guidelines within it that are more strict or examples in that way. But that's really the one that I see that we see the most of, is that roofing and that fire, and the windows.
Yeah, I've heard about windows from people.
Yeah, the windows seem to make a lot of not people happy, but also then you lose the character when you take the windows away.
Yeah, and it just seems like, can't Restoration Hardware help us with this? Get some new historic replacement items, I definitely met someone and they said they moved to Snowmass and they had given up because they couldn't get rid of the single pane windows in their wonderful little house, and it just was too cold for them over time.
Yeah. Well, we do appreciate that we exist to help figure out this balance, but sometimes it's nice to have input from you guys on the bigger picture code items, so we can make more informed decisions, but we appreciate your time.
It's good for us to hear from our community and from you as well. Duncan, what do you?
No, just echoing everybody. I think cleaning stuff up, I think, makes it, easier on staff and Jillian's workload. I think it makes it easier for us to interpret and implement the code, and I think it makes it easier for, people going into these projects, whether their goal is to preserve or, maximize the value of the property. It sort of creates a clear sandbox that they're allowed to play in, and
Nice.
simplifies the process. So.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time this evening and for helping keep us sharp and improve our systems.
We would also very much be open to any feedback you have for us on the applications that you see come through.
You'll notice that there haven't been any call-ups in a very long time.
Yeah.
So I think we think you're doing good work. And, whether it's you or P&Z, it's always the first cut at things that make our job a lot easier. We do read through your minutes after the meetings when we're reviewing to make our own decisions and things like that. So that's always very helpful to express yourself fully in those minutes. And I don't know if anybody else has any specifics for you or not, other than thank you.
Of course.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
I think that, oh, yeah, and I thought, okay. We had a meeting not long ago about the Cavern Mobile Home Park. And based on the process,
The board, you're finished with the HPC board.
yeah, okay.
I just, I didn't.
Yeah, no, I can let you go. This was just going to be like 2 minutes about what we're doing tomorrow. You're free to leave. Thank you.
See you,
Yeah,
thanks.
thank you. We could not add it with the 24-hour notice that's necessary to tomorrow's meeting, but we can add it as the special meeting that's coming up
20th.
on the 20th, and we can discuss it briefly tomorrow as to moving it forward. But there seemed to be a majority that were interested in that from the prior work session we had on the topic. So that's all, is an update. And we'll do that tomorrow and put it on at that point. I can make it as a motion. Okay, okay. I just try to find out the protocol and
Thank
all
you.
these things.
You gotta get it out before you forget it, too.
Yeah, I know, it's like, okay, so we are adjourned for this work session. Did you have anything else for us, Pete, or anything? No.
Nothing for this, other than the meeting that's scheduled for the 27th of this month, I'm going to cancel as a work session. We don't have any specific agenda items for that work session. I think Rachel is out of town, starting a little bit of rest. And so we were going to give you guys an evening back.
Extra Monday back.
Okay.
John, one less day to serve as
Chair.
chair.
Nice, thank you so much.
Yeah, there will be the meeting on Tuesday night.
I appreciate that.
So one day back.
Okay, very good.
Good timing, too. That's Memorial Day weekend, isn't it?
This is April.
Oh, April. Okay.
It's still good timing.